Namaskar. Welcome to this session. So, we have been considering Pratyahara, and therein we commence understanding the 5 forms of all the Indriyas which Patanjali mentions. And we saw the first form called functional form, and the functional form itself is quite wide spectrum kind of thing. It is not just that visual organs have only vision. They have many functions. So that is something that one has to have observation. And after functional form we came to Swarupa, and the Swarupa avastha of Indriyas is what is actualized in yogic process. And then beyond Swarupa there is asmitarupam. All the Indriyas have underlying principle of Asmita. Like merely organ of vision, the eyes, they don't function unless the nervous system behind it is working, blood circulation is available, and the mind is also behind it. So we know that many times the things go in front of our eyes, but we don't take notice of it, we don't take cognition of it, just because the mind is engaged somewhere else. So we very well know that the mind must be there behind the eyes, mind must be there behind the ears. So beyond that the mind should be there behind the senses for senses to function, there is asmitarupa. And there must be the pronoun'I. If the pronoun'I is engaged somewhere else, then the senses don't function. And the pronoun'I is also testified by the expression that these are my eyes, these are my ears, this is my stomach, liver, colon, bladder, heart, lungs. So when we say they are mine, there is a me in it. There is a me underlying it. So psychologically there must be mind behind the senses. But metaphysically there must be Asmita behind the senses. And in the metaphysics, Patanjalas have a position and they postulate that all the Indriyas, Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas come from Asmita, Ahankara Tattva. So Ahankara Tattva or Asmita principle is parental body behind senses. Therefore the Samkhya position is senses are ahamkarika. And we did consider about the Nayayikas and the Shankara Vedantins who hold Indriyas as bhautika. The point is, there is Asmita as a material of all senses, material of all organs, be those cognitive organs, mental organs, or body organs of anatomy. The Asmita is an underlying principle. So that is the Asmita Rupa. Let me tell you here, just as in physics, we are told on the particle plane of physics, or what is called as particle physics, the subatomic particles are underlying principles behind all manifest physical matter. Whether the matter is gaseous or solid or liquid form, the proton, neutron, electron will be on the causal plane of all matters. And this we had considered on an earlier occasion. And the physics finds a terminal at particle plane. And beyond that is metaphysics. Now, Asmita is a principle that is underlying the Indriyas, all kinds of Indriyas. But then there is something underlying Asmita as well. That is the next Rupa called Anvaya Rupam. Anvaya means concomitance, as it was divulged to you on a previous occasion. And that is the Adya Rupam, Sattva Rajatama three gunas. They form the Adya Swarupa, primordial cause. Primordial, the parental body. That is the fourth Rupam. Anvaya Rupam means Sattva Rajatama gunas. So this is the metaphysics behind all the Indriyas. But then there is a fifth final form, the fifth and final form, Antima Rupam, that is called Prayojana Rupam. Prayojana means, as you should recall, teleological purpose. That purpose gives rise to effects. The purpose gives rise to manifestation. And in metaphysics, they tell us that purpose is underlying all manifestation, grosser or subtler, visible or invisible. So these purposes are, according to teleology, Bhogarthata and apavargarthata in Patanjali's system. So all the Indriyas are either for Bhoga of the Purusha or apavarga of the Purusha. So that is the fifth form of the Indriyas. So, because we were considering the Indriyas in Pratyahara, we embarked upon this topic of 5 forms of Rupam, 5 forms of Rupa of the Indriyas. Now, that came in incidentally. Now let's revert back to Pratyahara. So Pratyahara is antarmukhi and atmadhimukhata. It is inwardliness, infacedness and self-wordliness. Without that self-wordliness, atmadhimukhata or inwardliness, the Pratyahara has actually no meaning. So, as I refer to one of the commentaries called Maniprabha by Ramananda Yati, Ramananda in his Maniprabha says that the pratiloma parinama of the Indriyas is Pratyahara. The reversal process of Indriyas itself is Pratyahara. So the Indriyas have a forward movement. Forward movement means go externally towards their objects. Go externally towards their functions. So the cognitive organs go outward towards their objects, which are of the form of sound, touch, form, taste, and odor. Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. The cognitive organs go after their objects. The organs of mind and organs of anatomy also go to their objects. So that is their forward movement. But then if there is a reversal in their process, and yoga mentions the reversal of the process, and just reverse journey of all these organs, which would take them towards their Swarupam, their substantive form, and even inner form, more and more inner form, that is Pratyahara, and that is called pratiloma parinama. The senses and the organs must have pratiloma parinama, and by pratiloma parinama, that is reversal process. The reversal process is a part of technology of yoga, and that itself is Pratyahara. So usually the organs and senses have a tendency to go towards their own objects, appointed objects that are habituated to their functional forms, and therefore they go outwardly towards their objects. And then in that case, what happens is opposite of Pratyahara, as we listed earlier. Pratyahar, atirikt, anahar, apahar, alpahar, upahar, atyahar. So all those things which we saw in the list to understand the word Pratyahara right in the beginning of the Pratyahara topic. So they proceed towards those activities and those intakes in various forms. But when there is a reversal of them, reversal of their process, then it becomes antarmukhi, inwardliness, infaceedness, self-wordliness, and that is Pratyahara. And this is needed in spiritual process. This is needed in parmartha. That is why the literature on parmartha says that there must be Vishaya vinivartanam. So this is described as Vishaya vinivartanam in Adhyatma. Nivartanam. Nivartanam means to retrace. And that is a reversal movement. And the Shastra also says that Pratyahara is not only for yoga, but some form of Pratyahara, some degree of Pratyahara is also advocated for good health. Because if otherwise Pratyahara of some form is not taken recourse to, then the other things start happening which are opposite. Atyahar, anahar, etc., etc. We saw there was the ahara aspect. The word ahara was rendered with various prefixes. And that is not good for health. And therefore, it becomes practical to be really going for pratyahara of some form and pratyahara of some degree. Even if you are not in yoga, the pratyahara is advocated what is called moderation and temperance. So even those who want to have practical purpose served by way of swasthya and arogyam, sadachar, the pratyahara would be coming in some form or the other. Without pratyahara, you can't have good conduct. Without pratyahara, you can't have that moderation and temperation which is advocated by health sciences. So that is called mitahara, mitasevanam, mitachara, parimitachara. So in Adhyatma Granthas, in the Adhyatmic texts, we are told about these aspects. So mitahar means moderate food habits. Mitasevanam means quite an amount of discipline and restriction in all intakes, particularly food at the dining table. What to eat and how much to eat, what not to eat, etc. So that discipline. So also mitachara. So the conduct of life also must be regulated. Now what is meant by regulating conduct of life is to have some kind of vairagya and therefore some kind of pratyahara as well. Some degree of pratyahara. So also mitachara. That means like square meals, there is square activity. So nothing going overboard. Everything within that box of discipline. So therefore the Adhyatmic texts stress on these factors such as mitahara, mitachara, mitasevanam, parimitachara, etc. So that's called sanyami vritti, restrained culture of the mind, restrained habits. And this is a kind of pratyahar which must be embraced by anyone, whether in yoga or not in yoga. And that is getting mentioned in one of the Upanishads called Mandala Brahmana Upanishad. So it does mention this, that for to be in proper purushartha, one must have control over Indriya laulyam. Indriya laulyam means sensuality. So there must be some regulation over sensory tendencies. Unregulated senses spell disaster in every front. Practicality of life, mundane life, worldly life, and of course spiritual life. And therefore the Upanishad stresses on some kind of control over Indriya laulyam, some kind of control over sensory tendencies, some sort of reformation and restriction on sensory tendencies. And then that is the kind of pratyahar that would come even one who is not in yoga. And of course, those who are in spiritual paths, who are aruruksha plane, beginners, neophytes, they should understand the importance of this regulatedness in our life, which means regulatedness in our senses, sensory tendencies. Now, even for such a kind of minimal level of pratyahar, many of us have to wage a battle within ourselves, because that itself is quite difficult. The things are easy said than done. So to be adhering to these ideals in life, it almost becomes a battle. Shandilya Upanishad mentions about it. It also mentions what is called as emergency means, apatkalina upaya, where you have to really whiplash your senses. In yoga you don't whiplash your senses, but otherwise you will have to whiplash your senses, because to be restraining the sensual tendencies, sensory tendencies, more often it's a battle, and when it is a battle, you will have to fight it out. When you fight it out, then you will have to whiplash the senses and their tendencies. So if the senses are absolutely disorderly, then of course such kind of control is also needed. And many times, as emergency means, it is needed for everyone. Even sadhaka in adhyatma sometimes needs this, because sometimes the senses go crazy, and when they go crazy, we need to take a disciplinary action. And disciplinary action is whiplashing the senses and their tendencies. So sometimes it comes very handy, and it must be adhered to without hesitation. When it is a battle, when to be restrained is a battle, to be restraining the senses, to be restrained in senses is a battle. As emergency means, we must launch an offensive in the internal realm. But it's a temporary means. It cannot be used very often. Once in a while it can be used, it should be used, but if you start using more often, then perhaps you will build revolt to your idealism. So this kind of measure should not come too often and very often. Then otherwise it would be quite devastating. You cannot be whiplashing the senses every now and then. Once in a while it is okay. So this is getting mentioned in Shandilya Upanishad, which is one of the Yoga Upanishads. Balat aparanam is what the Upanishad says. So sometimes the senses are absolutely disorderly, unscrupulous, very naughty. In that case, as a temporary measure, emergency measure, such severe measures should be applied, but that should not become a regular feature. Then what is really the way and what is the means to really get this pratyahara? The most important aspect to be inculcating the culture for pratyahara is satsanga. No measure is as potent as satsanga. And therefore, those in the path of adhyatma and parmartha should be absolutely heedless about satsanga and should give high priority to satsanga. It should not come once in blue moon. This should be a regular feature. Satsanga is so important. So the satsanga will tell you about realities of life, realities of yourself, reality about the things around you, and that it impresses about the metaphysical core aspect of the creation that we have within ourselves and around ourselves, such as the statement Vasudevam Sarvamidam. All this is Vaishnavi, Vishnumayam idam jagata, Ishavasyam idam sarvam, Sarvam khalvidam brahma. So these are hammered on our mind and intelligence often in satsanga. And with satsanga, the sattva guna increases and the tamo guna diminishes. When tamo guna diminishes, the senses lose their power to be in madness. And therefore sattva guna plays very important role, and this is usually collected by satsanga. And therefore in adhyatma, satsanga has enormous importance. So that will help the consciousness to attain some height. And when the consciousness rises up, then these foul plays will not be played by tendency body and sensory tendencies. Then the life should be adhyatma pravana, paramartha pravana. So the life should be under the ethos and under the influence of parmartha and adhyatma, what is called spirituality. So when their gravities are stronger, the mind rarely misbehaves. And how is this brought about? Paramartha pravanata, adhyatma pravanata, that is to be always in nitya vihita karma and karma phala tyaga. To be in nitya vihita karma and karma phala tyaga with respect to those karmas. So we must identify our vihita karma, niyata karma, the duty mindedness, and not only to be in just duties but offer the fruits thereof to the indweller Almighty within us. Because this kind of philosophy is impressed on our mind by what is called as Isha Vasya Vritti, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagatyena Taktyena Bhunjita Magrida Katsya Dhanam. The very first hymn of Isha Vasya Upanishad must be really pondered over by those who are sincerely going for this effort of Pratyahara. So, Nitya Karma and then Karma Phala Tyaga is so important. And in the ethos of Yoga Dharma, we have Krishnarpana Vritti, Brahmarpana Vritti, and then Ishavasya Vritti. So that's also a kind of Pratyahara. That means you are not actually in Pratyahara, that the senses are drawn inwards. It is the influence of philosophy, of conduct of life. So when the philosophy of conduct of life is influencing us, there is a very spontaneous, natural Pratyahara. Then there is another kind of Pratyahara mentioned in Shandilya Upanishad, which says Sarva Vishaya Parangamukhatvam. As Patanjali and Vyasa have told us about Vishaya Dosha Darshanam, you should recall in the Vairagya topic, Vairagya chapter, Vishaya Dosha Darshanam. So Vishaya Dosha Darshanam, that means discerning the defects in all these worldly matters, sensory objects and the worldly matters. One should be having inhibition towards worldliness and mundanity. So that just by inhibition to be worldly, inhibition to be mundane, that itself is a kind of pratyahara that is called Sarva Vishaya Parangamukhatvam. That means turning back to objects which entice us. So by satsanga and sadhana sanga and shastra sanga, we get these kind of influences, philosophical influences on our mind, and then these things really get actualized. So again, this is for everyone who is trying to lead a noble life, whether you are in yoga or not in yoga, but you want to lead a noble life, then the satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha are great resources. So the shastras mention about that. Then Sarva Vishaya Parangamukhatvam, which was mentioned just now, it is a path of a mendicant. Usually mendicants, ascetic people, out of asceticism, they embrace this kind of Parangamukhatvam, that is turning the back to objects, turning the back to enjoyments, turning the back to gratifications. But then it also means that for such kind of measure, one needs to head towards Himalayas. One needs to turn the back to the world and head towards Himalayas and be in some recluse. And then we get so many akhyanas in Puranas. If you look into Puranas, you will get many such akhyanas which mention about such kind of things. So you will see that these are not essentially yogic measures that we have so far considered. Now we are going to the fifth kind of pratyahar mentioned in Shandilya Upanishad. We have been considering the Shandilya Upanishad in all those various forms of vairagya which we are seeing now. So there is a fifth kind of vairagya which is embracing yoga tantra. And in Shavasana, this is adhered to. See, it's like this. Night time when you are lying down in your bed, you draw your bed sheet or your blanket from foot side and draw it up. How do you draw your blanket when you are in bedroom? How do you draw your chaddar, bed sheet, to cover your body? You draw it from foot part, soles of the feet. You draw the blanket or that bed sheet up higher and higher and higher. So there is similarly blanketing process in Shavasana. So that is a blanket of pratyahar. So this is a yogic technique that is interesting and it is mentioned in Shandilya Upanishad. So the pratyahar starts coming from that inhibition should be launched from the toe, big toe of the feet. From there, we should slowly go upwards. What is this route? Big toe, soles of the feet, or the 10 toes, and then the ankle, then the shank and calf, then the knees, then the thighs, and then the groins, perineum, anal mouth, then the genital organ, then the nabhi, the navel, and then the hridayasthanam, then kanthasthanam, then kanthakupa, and then the jaw, then the nostrils, and then the two eyes, eyeballs, eyebrows, forehead, and shirsha. So this is the process of drawing the pratyaharic blanket in this order which was mentioned just now. And simply the process is from your soles of the feet part as you draw your bed sheet, which goes on covering foot part, ankle part, shin part, knee part, thigh part, groin part, waist part, abdomen and diaphragm and chest and etc. So gradually coming up with the blanket of pratyahar, ultimately taking it up to shirsha, crown of the head. So the aroha krama, this is called aroha krama. And then similarly pratyahar has to go in avaroha krama in descending order. And this is a kind of technically a prananyasa. That is the yogic process of pratyahar. So this is called the marmasthanas, and the marmasthanas are slowly covered by pratyaharic blanket in ascending form and then descending form. So that is what is mentioned in the Shandilya Upanishad as fifth kind of pratyahara. For a neophyte, you get a piece of instruction from Darshanopanishad. So this piece of instruction is on the plane of achara, on the plane of conduct of life. The Indriyas, the senses, which have tendency to go towards their objects, must be with regulation and control and some kind of reins over them. They should be pulled back. This is a very primary measure which gets mentioned in Darshanopanishad. This is also called Shama. Now, with regards to Pratyahara, let's take little psychological dimension of it for consideration. Pratyahara very word is a process of inculcating Shama and Dhamma, mentioned as Shat Sampattis, two of the Shat Sampattis in Adhyatma. The Shat Sampattis are Shama, Dhamma, Titiksha, Uparati, Jnana, Vairagya, Shanti, Samadhan. So Shama, Dhamma. Shama is mental restraint and Dhamma means sensory restraint. So practicing something of the nature of Shama and Dhamma is Pratyahara. So Shama is Mano Nigraha and Dhamma is Indriya Nigraha. So the two kinds of Nigrahas, two kinds of restraints are Pratyahara. Now for the sake of Shama Dhamma, to be qualifying for Shama Dhamma, Ahar, Vihar, Achar, Vichar must be regulated. So we must consider our domain of Ahar, Vihar, Achar, Vichar, and they must be set right. They must be well managed. That is of paramount importance, atyavashyaka. And the very prayatna, very effort, very endeavor in that direction itself is pratyahara. Although actually pratyahara may not have actualized, but sincere attempt or intent even would be a step in pratyahara. And satsanga plays a vital role here. And therefore just satsanga itself is pratyahara. If you are in satsanga, then there is some degree of pratyahara in you. And of course satsanga also should be also accompanied or should be assisted by sadhana sangha and shastra sangha. We have delineated on this umpteen number of times, so I won't go into sangatraya. This would transfigure the mind, transmute the mind, sublimate the mind, subjugate the mind and sublimate the mind, and that itself would be a very, very vital pratyahara. So, we had little account of this pratyahara which comes in Yoga Upanishads. Basically, Shamadama kind of pratyahara is very valuable, invaluable, very fundamental. Now, this pratyahara is not only yogopayogi, it gains more importance in yoga and adhyatma, but it is also important if one is not in parmartha, one is not in adhyatma, one is not in spiritual practice or spiritual gravity or not even the gravity of yoga, yet Shamadama is advocated. Then it is not only that pratyahara is useful for yoga because it is counted as limb of yoga, it is also good. It is also limb in dharma, karma, adhyatma, paramartha. And they all give significant importance to Shamadama sadhana. Shamadama is also Daivi Sampada according to Bhagavad Gita. So, Dharma Sadak, Jnana Sadak, Adhyatma Sadak, Paramartha Sadak, Sadachari, Sadvartani, all these people, the class of these people need Pratyahara. So Pratyahara is not only a limb of yoga, but understand how Pratyahara has a wider scope. To be an idealistic life or to be embracing ideal kind of life, some degree of Pratyahara is important. And therefore it is counted as Daivi Sampada. And if one doesn't want to become a brutal human being, if one doesn't want to become wild human being, then Pratyahara is important. Otherwise, one will be prone towards Ati Ahara invariably. So that's why the Pratyahara is also important for Ayur Arogyam. This dose of Vairagya has to be taken for good health and well-being and wellness. It is needed very much in Dharma, Karma, Yoga, Jnana. But the dosage is definitely larger. So, point is, everyone has to take the dosage of Shamadama kind of Pratyahara, and those in Paramartha, Adhyatma Yoga need a bigger dose, mega dose. Whether you are Astik or Nastik, whether you are theistic person or atheistic person, whether you are Ihavadi or Paramarthavadi, whether you are materialistic person or spiritual person, whether you are Jadavadi, Bhogavadi, Atmavadi, everyone has to embrace. So Astik, Nastik, Ihavadi, Jadavadi, Paramarthavadi, Bhogavadi, Atmavadi, Vyavaharavadi. So these are the kinds of human beings which are discussed in Adhyatma Granthas of the saints. So in some degree or the other, Pratyahara has to be taken in as a medicine which would ensure wellness in life, well-being in life. Now, we are going to have a look at the physiological dimension of Pratyahara. It is quite interesting to understand physiological dimension of Pratyahara. We otherwise think that Pratyahara is something very psychological, psychomental. It is the mind which has to be really preparing itself for Pratyahara. So we think it is all in the realm of mind that Pratyahara should be there. It is violation of Pratyahara also because of the mind. But now we are going to take the physiological perspective called Sharira Vaigyanik thought about Pratyahara. But that will be in the next session. So enough for the time being. Namaskar all of you.